All right, so this is the new Symbility scope notes for Victim Bob. I'm Alina
Hey, Alina.
Beckman here. Yeah, and this is Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hey, guys. Hi.
All right, so where did you want to start, Adam? What do you think is the best way to
Well,
get this
one of
done?
the things that we've noted is that the way that Symbility works in Sketch is significantly different in some ways than the way Xactimate does, and this has an effect on the kind of scope notes that you're actually going to grow accustomed to taking when you're in the field. There's some differences, and we just want to take a minute to show you side by side what field scope notes might look like if you were working with Xactimate, and what those scope notes might look like for the exact same claim if you're working in Symbility. So we've made up two sets of scope notes, one from the Xactimate class that we've been running for some time, and one for the new Symbility class we're launching that is going to show some differences that you'll want to take into account when you're making field notes.
Okay. So basically, you can already see the way we had to draw the actual room dimensions is totally different. And one of the major reasons for that, the actual dimensioning of the room, was I had to account for the door openings here and for the base cabinets that we have in the kitchen that we had to replace the toe kick on. So the reasoning
Mm-hmm.
behind that is Symbility requires you to create these reference areas for you to attach material to. You can't just throw it into the room. Per se, it doesn't like that so very much, and in fact, it may cause an audit issue on the back end. As I was talking to tech support, looking at my final version of the estimate, I had all these audit issues they were saying, kind of like a file reviewer problem, when you send it up to be file reviewed. So what I'm trying to say here is that in order to make a cleaner looking estimate and something that hopefully won't, be just shot right back at you, you need to be able to attach items now to some sort of reference area or actual window or door in the estimate in order to make it look true to what a file reviewer kind of situation would look like. So that's why I have these base cabinets here and my doors and I'm accounting for those things compared to the Xactimate way of doing things where you can put a line item in and just change the quantity and go. Symbility acts totally different. So that's why you're seeing that major difference in the dimensioning of our rooms. You'll also
So
see,
we
go ahead.
so we had Okay, so now if you have a window or a door or some missing wall, the old method is that if in Xactimate, if it was a small area and you really didn't want to take it into account because of the rules of the company you're working for, that if you have a smaller opening, you can just ignore it.
Yes.
In Symbility, it's true that you could ignore that opening unless there was something related to it. For instance, if you had to detach and reset window blinds, you would actually have to put a window in there in order to have a reference point for the detaching and the resetting of the window blinds, which are associated with windows, to go on. Is that right?
That is right. It really actually depends on the back end of how what this audit issue is. So if you were working for a company that maybe didn't want to see something less than, I'm just going to pick a figure out of the air. Let's say they didn't want to see less than 36 square feet, and you can't, account for that window because they don't care about seeing that square footage taken out. Well, what you could do is create a general items folder and throw the window blinds in there for that. It's just that on the back end, that wouldn't be one of these audit issues because the file, the carrier has those set guidelines. We don't want to see less than 36 square feet. So then that audit issue goes away for that instance. This is, per carrier issue as always. So there's two schools of thought on that actually. What is your threshold for your window and door openings? And what square footage do you need to account for? It's just tough. It's harder to not account for the windows in Symbility than it is to go ahead and account for them. So the way that I wrote these scope notes was in a way that's easier for the user to get acquainted with the program. And then if you go to work for one of these carriers that doesn't want to account for that opening, I think that you'll be better prepped by learning how to do it rather than how not to do it. Does that make sense? How
Hmm.
to remove
Hmm.
it later on. So you could throw those blinds into a general items box that we talk about in class, but that would be that would be a scenario where the audit issue wouldn't be a problem because the carrier guidelines are don't want to see that
Yeah,
square footage. So eh, there's two ways to do everything. It always seems like, and so yeah.
I think we're on the same page here. I see what you're saying. So, strategically, just to understand how Symbility is set up to function, this is the path that they want you to go down. This is the way it's designed, and if you follow along with it, you're better off.
Yes, exactly. So if you learn how to do it the way Symbility wants you to, it's easier to, after taking the class and going through all of our tutorials, if you need to do it a different way because the carrier requires it, you'll be prepped for it, and you'll have enough knowledge that you can just you know be able to adhere to that situation if that arises. And actually, that's the easier way to do it. I show the most basic, hardest way to do things, so you'll be prepped for everything out in the field. That's kind of my school of thought on that.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
Okay. Um, as you'll see, and as we go through the line items here, the first two are pretty much the same. I'm just more used to writing my scope notes with the item first and then the action afterwards, so that's just a user thing there. The third line item, you'll see reskin toe kick. I don't include the linear feet here because we've already created this reference area that shows the linear footage of the front of those base cabinets. So that was why I don't include a lot of the dimensions that were included on the old victim bob or the Xactimate victim bob there. So I'm show also you'll see with the replace on the baseboard. I've got them on the south and west wall, and the reason I did that is I want to illustrate how with base cabinets, whenever you set this reference area, Symbility automatically removes the linear feet behind where you set the base cabinet. So that's why I have you adding them to the south and the west walls rather than giving you the 50% of the perimeter of the floor, because I'd like to illustrate how that happens. If you have this base cabinet reference area, it will auto remove the linear feet behind. So that's just kind of a illustration of that. Other than that, I think we're pretty much the same. I didn't include the minimal charge on the outlets not functioning because I'd like to kind of have the adjuster think through how do we deal with outlets not functioning, what do we need to do, and kind of have them arrive at minimum charge. So that was just a change that I decided to make. It could be added back in. I don't know how you feel about that, Adam.
No, no, that's fine. We can go over that in class. Not a problem.
Okay. If we take a look at the bathroom here, I've again added the door and the vanity is a reference area. When you see this vanity and base cabinets, those are reference areas that we will add in class. So when you look at the bathroom scope notes, again, I kind of went with that setting up of that reference area as a tool to adhere items to. So for our vanity, pretty much everything's the same here as it was before. You'll notice at the bottom, the vanity top, the faucet, and the vanity will all be added to that reference area. Therefore, it'll take on those dimensions of our reference area. So we have a 4-foot long vanity, and that's where we attach those items. So that's where you'll see that difference there. As far as the paint one coat and mask walls, that's an interesting issue. This masking and painting issue is a big difference between the Xactimate and Symbility. When you add the paint and mask in Symbility, it wraps it all into one line item. And if you look at that, I'm going to go ahead and, if that's okay, pull up my Symbility here and just show you that difference live. I'm just going to open up my claim here in Symbility and take a look at that bathroom. If you want to look here, I have a prep and mask for painting. Let's see here. Sorry, that's not the one. Here we go. Paint and mask walls, one coat. If I choose that line item here in Symbility and right click on it, I can go to its properties. Okay, now what I'm looking for is, what does this include? That's why I'm going into this specific line item. I want to know, what does this include? So I'm going to go to its properties and go to this comment here, and it tells me I have labor and materials to mask and paint the walls, plus includes the use of a drop cloth, painter's tape, and the plastic sheeting where necessary. So that's why it's totally different than the Victim Bob Xactimate estimate, where we have to tell Xactimate mask the ceiling, mask the floor, and then mask the tub surround. It's a different school of thought here because they wrap it all into that paint line item. I thought that was really interesting that it's so different here in Symbility for your mask and paint. So that's a major difference between the two notes there, is that painting issue.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, we see a lot of differences when we get to roofing and exterior elevations, right?
Okay, yep, that's so true. I'm going to go ahead and roll on through. Our living room is pretty much the same here. I'll just kind of show you the scope notes on living room for Symbility. Give me one moment here and I'll pull those up. So the living room, the only difference that you really see is going to be the addition of those windows and doors to the, excuse me, there we go, floor plan. So what I'm trying to say here is, you've got a difference in the floor plan here because we had to account for those windows there and the doors in order to attach items. So again, a difference in the actual writing of the scope notes and dimensioning is totally different in for Symbility than it would be if I was doing or performing an Xactimate estimate. So that's your living room main differences. There is going to just be the dimensioning of the room itself. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the roof here. Let me pull that up for Symbility. Okay. And this is going to be the scope notes for the roof for the Symbility program there. And as you can see, it is quite notably different than the Xactimate scope notes. In Xactimate, you can measure your ridge and then your rafter length and be able to arrive, and your span, just depending on your style of measuring a roof. But it's based on measuring the roof itself with Xactimate. That's their school of thought. With Symbility, it seems that they want you to measure the footprint of the home, which would be these dotted lines here if you look in my window. They want you to measure the footprint and then add the roof on top of the footprint. So it's not so heavily based on rafter length and ridge like it would be in Xactimate. It seems that they want you to draw the footprint of the home and then go from there. So if you want to look at my window, you've got the let me just pull these over here a little bit. You've got these dimensions here. If you'll see, 14'8" is actually the length of the side of the house, not the span of the roof here in my notes. So I had to actually draw the scope notes totally and completely different from Xactimate. You'll also see that we have to talk about the eave rake width on the Symbility notes, whereas Xactimate totally leaves those out. You do have to tell the program your even rake width now in order to determine your squares of roofing to account for that. So what I'm trying to say is, you've got your footprint and then you need to account for your even rakes above you in order to get your total squares correct on the roof. So just a totally different school of thought here. The other thing we have to pay attention to is our eave height on Symbility to make sure that our roofs line up and create the correct valleys that you'll need to to correctly scope your roof. So you do have to tell the program the eave height as well. So a lot of different dimensions that we didn't really have to mess around with to say in order to get the scope notes taken differently. So just a totally different school of thought, but that's okay. Just a different way of learning.
Yeah, so folks, we just wanted to give you a little primer before we head into the class to show you some of the differences we're going to be encountering if you're familiar with Xactimate when we go into Symbility. And just it's basically a measuring or a sketching strategy difference. So we'll be exploring that in the class itself, and I think that kind of wraps it up.
Okay.
We've got some elevation issues. I think in this particular situation, we did not. Isn't that right, Elena? You do not have elevation sketches
Correct.
for Symbility, but you do for Bob Victim, and we'll go into more detail as to why that is once we get into the class.
That's correct. Yes, we don't have to account for or draw the elevations, dimension the elevations the same way as Xactimate. We can just scope the damage and then go. We don't have to draw out these dimensions like we used to. So yeah, you will see that in the class.
Excellent. And we'll also at some point in the class get into how to handle a roof claim or elevation claim when you're really not going to be taking the whole footprint, the whole floor plan. But for right now, I think that gives a good primer of the differences in scope notes.
All right.
So thanks, everybody. And this is Adjuster Pro. We'll see you in class.
All right. Thank you.